And I think as personal level, my first contact with the ocean was through the Navy. I was a search and rescue swimmer. It went very wrong. We lost the war, and I decided, no, I'm never going to do this again. So I went fishing, which was like, I love boats, but the whole structure of preparing everything and the structure and making sure everything is right from the beginning, it doesn't cut it for me anymore. So I went fishing, which is pretty much about sorting things out as they happen, like, beating up a speaker and see if that works, otherwise go and look at the connections. So these two worlds is kind of, for me, commit here. Prepare, look, prepare, look, change, prepare, look, change, paper, coordination, people, I always love when you see the picture of, the people sitting there, making sure that everything works. And then on the other side, the guys jumping on boats, looking at things and seeing what happens. So, now, always you go with a bit of history. So, this started pretty much back in 2018, because it was kind of like a bit of a lost space there. And I remind you that on the first day, we presented on the IUU quantification report we work. And the answers were very good. First, collaboration work. The first hour of this was collaboration does work. In between 2016 and between 2020, through better understanding, but also through focusing your few resources where you need them, IUU fishing in the Pacific went down, and we can demonstrate that. Now, the things that doesn't work, we found out there's the issue of misreporting, and my colleague Stephen showed a little bit of what we're doing in terms of that. And so with the scales during transshipment, the big hole is on high seas transshipment, and Moritz is going to talk about what we do around that. The other one was port state measures. So the good thing about port is that there is nothing more useless than a fishing boat that cannot unload. Honestly, it's just nothing more useless. It's a piece of metal that is floating and is spending money. So ports are the natural place where fish go. So if we can manage that, then it's much easier. However, we sort of took you could go, as anyone else, or maybe people have done, is, let's sign port state measures agreement, because signing a piece of paper fixes everything. And we had bad experiences in the Pacific in the past of signing pieces of paper that were pushed perhaps by foreign affairs, and then trying to be implemented by fisheries, and then have trade blocks coming and saying, oh, you signed this and you're not doing it, you're going to get a yellow card. So people go, oh, so hang a second, let's sign. So I think when we started in Marshall Islands, this was also the proposal that go further, that says, do first, sign later. So, but what we're going to do first. So the first thing to do is just basically say, okay, is this part of what we want to do? And it was in the MCS strategy. We do the paper side, and then we start implementing things. Of course, Port State Measures Agreement is the one who sets up the language. So the FFA Regional Port State Measures Framework provide vital elements, processes, and responses necessary to facilitate the target and effective PSM across the region. But the point is that if you want to do something based on everyone does the same, well, that doesn't really work in the Pacific. Johnny was mentioning about the lack of assets in Niue. And it's not because Niue is bad, it's just they don't have a port. So they don't have a place where to anchor or put aside their assets. So we have places like Majuro with 700 vessels coming up, second in terms of volumes, in terms of number of transshipments to Busan. yeah, but bigger in terms of volumes. And you have, you know, the Cook Islands, which is basically, you know, big, huge zone, but a very small wharf. So even if they're a port, it's very difficult to do things there. So it's Nauru is building the port. So we have all this sort of difference. And then we have Solomon Islands, we have Kiribati, we have Funafuti. So different strategies, different things work. But you want to have a standard where you start from. So this is because that's the reason why we go, okay, let's start slowly and, you know, move forwards. The PSM framework guides FFA members in developing the minimum port state measure standard to be applied at national level, promoting, of course, inter-region collaboration and the usual things. We talked about a lot of information and change, and that is structure in the Pacific among FFA members, and to apply for all fishing vessels. And that was an interesting thing because carriers were kind of drifting off site for most of us, and we go, well, no. In fact, if you work on transshipment, carriers are the nodes. You have carriers, you will have containers coming. You have no carriers, containers will not come. So, and the other thing we made sure is that it was really important to know that it's not explicitly aimed to implementing the PSMA. However, if you do that, you're pretty much there. The point is the PSMA, sort of assigning PSMA is a strategic decision for the members. And something that FFA does well is we're here to support, but decisions are taken at national level. It's always at the discretion of the member states. So, now, how this apply in principle? We got the vessel, got the port state, we got designation of a port. The request of port entry comes from the vessel or the agent. So we're trying to figure out, put more of the agents. I think with carriers, the next one we didn't really pay much attention was the agents, and that is the interface in between the vessel and us. Now it's easier because most vessels have communication devices through internet, etc., but it used to be the radio. So we have it's a number of players there, the flag state, the coastal state. We're taking all of this into consideration to go through a risk assessment. This risk assessment provides a couple of options. One is to deny port entry, which is consistent with the Port State Measures Agreement, but it's seldomly used, you know, because basically, are you going to pass the problem to your neighbor? It will be possible, but, you know. So, but it's there and can be used. And if that happens, then you have communication to whatever other places that vessel was and to our regional organizations. Then the second one is to allow port entry. So once we allow port entry, there's a couple of options. We do no inspection and permit port use. And this is important, the issue of port use. A lot of what we do in the Pacific focus on port use because we have very few vessels that we don't know. Our colleagues talk about the registry for the commission. Then we have the vessels in good standing. So most of the vessels in the 7 years have been helping and working with pretending to work in the Marshall Islands. We never had a vessel that wasn't in the registries, and this is the biggest port. So then, risk dependent, we may have an inspection, which follows the second type of risk assessment when you go on board. And this will produce either the permitting port use, so the vessel does its business, or defer port use. Why? Because there is the lack of something. I don't know. Permit of Kiribati has to come over through the facts. Okay, good, let's wait for it. And again, this deferring of port use has already an economic impact. So if you, look, the permit is there, we're going to start transshipping and then no. So, and here comes part of the strategy. It's like, it's hard for a small fisheries administration to prove the vessel wrong. What we do is we let the vessel prove itself right. So let's wait for the paper to come and then you can start. Of course, this requires a lot of mechanisms inside the port and inside the collaboration you have with port authorities, with maritime police, with others to go, like this vessel it's okay for him to be here, but if no fish leave that vessel, and that vessel doesn't get next to another vessel until that piece of paper appears. Of course, you can always deny port use, and then that goes into the top and you advise and the vessel leaves the region, or you detain it. So, and of course, if the paper doesn't appear, you defer. So this separates a bit from the structure of port state measures agreement, but we find that this reflects more the reality that we have in the region. And remember, I was working for FIO in 2009 when we signed this, and things have changed substantially from 2009 to now. So vessel leaves or gets detained. Now, if we allow port use, then we had other things here in the region that are important for us once the vessel is allowed to have port use. We have routine or targeted monitoring. For example, more and more we have monitors, which are observers that are not involved in observers that go on board and monitor transshipments in terms of composition, volumes, potential MARPOL issues, potential compliance issues, species of interest, etc., etc. Or biological sampling. So we lost a lot of the capabilities of biological sampling by observers on board, but we can still do it when fish is unloaded or transshipped. But also, for example, we have a group, an improving group of countries that are getting the sanitary authorizations. So it's the Fisheries Department or the Ministry of Health that get involved on the sanitary side. And this may not sound important, but I've learned that when the fish is on deck, it's not fish anymore, it's food. And it's a second set of regulatory requirements that complements the first one, which is the legal side of fisheries. So working in coordination helps in a lot of things, particularly in terms of traceability, which is something that we are going to talk as the last thing you're going to hear from me at the end of the day. So, then departure clearance. And this, when the vessel is departure clears, again, different countries have different methodologies. All of this process needs to be involved in data and information capture that goes back to the initial risk assessment. So if we know all the story, when the vessel boats come back, we can make a more informed decision. Keeps feeding himself up. Now, some members have a policy of 100% inspection. That's it. Every vessel that comes in gets inspected, even national vessels. Other ones have targeted. Other ones go by gear, for example. They have 35 longliners that are working from the local port and a charter to a local company. So we have a much closer control. We literally see them when they're unloading. So for example, we say, okay, for that one will be 25 and we will adjust if we have more people or not. But when this was agreed, it was a way to have a structured system, but then at the same time, see what works for everyone. Okay, so there's two components to the risk assessment. The first one is agreed upon minimal level on risk assessment process and a rapid assessment that will inform all FFA members for port decisions. Consistency along everything, and so it's like the minimal to start. And then a second proposal is foundational assessment that inform port use decision and in port responses. These are more aspirational ones, and the idea is that you need to do the first one, and as soon as you start using that as a base, you move into the second one. I think because the disproportionate burden that we have in comparison with other places, it's important. Don't let the perfect get on the way of the good. And I think that is a good start. So otherwise, everyone gets overwhelmed. The other thing, and I agree with Johnny's perception, is that, see, this is work. This is fundamental, a lot of work. And you're putting that on the desk of people that already have a lot of work. So either we need to expand the group of people we have, which is really hard because of issues around constraints on budgets, but also on attracting and maintaining talent. It's really hard to attract and maintain talent, particularly in fisheries. So are you going to put something that you know is going to fail because lack of people? So let's walk, then run. That was a bit of the strategy. So level 1 operates at this level. Level 2 operates here, but the continuing risk assessment based on the interagency cooperation and the rest operates down here. So you start here and then you go down. I'll say at this stage, most members are either well entrenched on level 2 or starting there. The basics of Port 1 is vessels, they need an advanced request. So you cannot just appear on the entry of the port and call the pilot, as I used to do when I used to fish, particularly on Friday afternoon, because then you know nobody's there until Monday. And then the level risk, the initial level risk criteria, then level 1, if it is, so we separate for vessels that are on the commission register or vessels that are not on the commission register. Of course, different levels of depthness on that. And then a decision on port entry. As such, again, level 2 risk criteria, we go deeper on the vessels that are in the commission, on the vessels that are not. Then a decision on port use and the level of monitoring requirement, and this, of course, an ongoing assessment, and then departure clearance. So, we made a list of questions with a list of elements. So we go, okay, for example, this is just example. So this is all in the bigger presentation. I'm not going to go to details because otherwise we're never going to leave this place. But just for you to have an idea. So it is provided in the in the hours that we are expecting, and then the hours are decided by each member. So if it's no, well, then no. You need to go back one step. Do you submit the correct documents? And this is a list of the documents. No, yes, no. Is any good standing of FFA? Yes, move on. Yeah, because that means that all of the tails of the 2 former steps are there. It's in the list, recognize, but it's not in the FFA, so you can make a decision there. So it's all about what we know about the vessel. By the license, complete VMS, we have all these things, is an observer on board. Most of these things we already know because we have very good information database around the region, either through FFA or through PNA, and both, except that just they're mostly repeated, but they have other things that we need on PNA that, like, members in PNA are more freely assessing their the licensing databases, for example. So anyway, we could go, this is just the first page of all the questions we have. Some of them are very basic, as you can see. But the point is to offer the same level of structure and depth for the vessels that we know stuff from the vessels that we don't know stuff. If the vessel we don't know stuff because it's not either on the commission or the ITCC one, then we go deeper and all of these elements need to be there. But again, this is so all of the vessels we have, they're mostly well known to us. So, level 2, again, vessels on the Western Central Pacific Regional Fishing Vessel system, the vessels not on the list, and we go deeper and deeper, and we need to get this information in order to identify the risk that we face. So, now, but then come the next question. Is information sources the only thing we need? First, we need a minimum amount of time and a system, which both are fundamentally linked. Yep. Hence, having an advanced request for entry to port is fundamental, because otherwise you cannot do all the due diligence you need to do in order for assessing that vessel before it comes in. You know, and this is not many years ago. You know, the vessel arrival, depending the vessel, will come either by an email directly from the vessel, go by a radio call, will come to an agent, or in many cases by text to the officer. So that was the first thing to standardize. Yeah. Now, you know, I see people still struggling in the region, not only in terms of time, but also in the terms of how they get the information of the arriving of the vessel. So this is moving forwards now. We are standardized and structurized. And then sometimes small, little, low-tech technologies. It's great to have the planes, but for example, you know, we have the computers, we have this, we have that, but we have power cuts. So a very simple tool that we've been putting around is the whiteboards. So vessel arrival notified, who is in, what is he doing, when he's leaving. Yeah, survives power cuts. As I say, we get information from vessels, or sometimes both at once, so you have two sources of information coming at the same time. I see Stephen kind of laughing about this and remaining the old days. Sometimes in less than 24 hours, or coming in a Friday afternoon. But though prescribed, that was more than 20 years ago, I'm prescribed now. So. Sources need a process first. We should remember that. So we have to have a process to treat sources. So here's my Navy hat coming. Then the fisherman hat comes in. So basically is how does the basic information of the arriving of a vessel get to us and in what time frame? Yep. And is this working for you? That's the first question you need to ask yourself. If not, that needs to be dealt first before you do anything else. How the information gets to you. Before we dive into the sources. What info are we asking for incoming vessels? The info we need is what we don't know. Yeah? Not what we know already or what we have on our systems. The traditional way, I remember seeing these guys, the former officers, all retired now, coming to the vessel with a form and writing the name of the boat. Yeah, and you kind of didn't knew that. We send all this when port arrival. So, you know, it was like, okay. So now here's English is not my first language. So let's give him a. So we don't. Do we know what we know, and what we don't know? That is the first thing. We need to know what we have, and at some stage, in many cases, we still don't know what we have. Sometimes we have more information than the one we can actually process or understand. What key information do we need to start the process that aligns with the risk we know we have, based on, for example, the compliance index or the history of the vessel? So we're going from the general to the particular. What is general about all vessels coming? Estimate the time of arrival, still how much time we have. Is it force majeure? Of course, there are issues around that, and we were very, very specific. Like in Majuro, for example, you know, somebody comes with force majeure, you know, open thing goes. Of course, it doesn't get near any other vessel to transship. Straight, inspectors go, board the officer. Normally, it's held. Horrific things like, you know, I remember the last one. I saw this guy with the hook. And I still have marks on hooks and long lines. This guy had a hook stuck in his elbow, so he couldn't really move his thing because the thing was inside his elbow. Majuro has a good hospital, so off we go. Identity. First thing we check is the identity. So all of this is about identity. So we have three components, and I'm gonna go through them. Identity. Is the vessel the one it says it is? You know, RCS, IMO, flag state, blah, blah, all these things. Type of vessel, records of the fishing vessel, we compare all that. So regional FFA and PNA information databases, so we cross-check to see if who's coming is actually that guy. Any other? You know, depending the specifics of the vessel. Who's responsible on board? So what information sources we need to verify all of this? Do we have them? Yes, if we have them, that's great. Move on. We don't have it, let's find it. What is particular about the vessel coming? And this is something we put a lot of effort on. It's great to have tools, it's great to have the VMS, it's great to have Starboard, it's great to have a global fishing board, etc., etc. But do you know what you're looking at? Yeah? Where was the last port? The last port is important for us because that frames the focus of the analysis. We need to assume that the vessel, so we're going to focus on what the vessel did in the last port. Because we like to assume that before it entered the other port, somebody did the same than us. That is a big part of why we have a regional framework. Otherwise, it's only for the countries. So what has been doing and where? Is the maneuvering consistent with fishing, transshipping, etc., etc.? Yeah? Does that align with our identity data? Yeah? If we see the vessel says, you know, it's a Persina, and you look at the track and you're going, that's, Persinas don't do that. Some carriers do that, but I think they're doing something else. They're not longlining. What fish do they say they have on board, and how much of it? Because we need to then use that information when we go on board. And interestingly, for Persinas, we have this information because they do e-reporting, and we have access to the e-reporting records. So, what information sources do we need to verify all this? Do we have them? No. I think I say it later, but one of the things the reason I moved sort of the compliance thing was I challenged an inspector. Actually, he's not here anymore, but yeah, he used to work with Nico in New Zealand. And I say, how will you regulate what you don't understand? And he said, well, what can I do about it? So I thought, okay, maybe move to the side. But it's important and I think that it's a great thing to have observers crossing the border and becoming fisheries officers, because they can see what's happening. I remember, like, oh, look at this guy. It's spent the whole night loitering there. What was he doing there? And I go, well, it's FAT closure. So, you know, the main thing about Persinas is fuel consumption. So during FAT closure, if the weather is all right, they just drift overnight, because they need to see the schools to want to catch them. So at night, they just drift, turn main engine down and drift. If you do that outside FAT closure, then have a look. But all these little things that are tricks of the trade, or, you know, or look at that. So it says it's a FAT set, it's a free school set, but it's at 4:30 a.m. And he reached the FAT at 2 knots. So I started the set at 2 knots. It's like, yeah, man, if it's free school, that fish is racing. Yeah, so you ain't gonna go at 2 knots. You're gonna be at 12 knots. You know? So those little things of the trade. So it's important for people to understand. I'm taking my time today, yeah. So anyway, general to particularly, licensing. Now we know where it's been. We know what it's been doing. Did it fish in these waters? Did it fish in that waters? We have all this information through the system. Do we have permits to leave the EZ so it can fish in other ones? Do it have license to fish in those EZs? Are there temporary special conditions associated to the fishing? FAT closures, bird bycatch mitigation measures, etc., etc. Are they doing what the license conditions are requiring them to do? And here's another great advantage we have through the minimum harmonized terms and conditions. Licenses are pretty standard in the Pacific. There are little specifics to each country, but, you know. And again, what information do we need? What sources of information do we need to verify all of this? Do we have them? Only after this, we gear up to go on board, or not. Yeah? Do we have all the answers to these questions we made so far? If not, then what? Yeah? We may need to go back to the agent or to the vessel. We may need to look for more sources of information. Do we need to find answers or evidence on board? Yeah? Do we know where? And now, a vessel is a small community where there is a massive level of, I would say, untrust in many of the members. So everything has a piece of paper and a record. You just need to know where to find it. We may only authorize port use once the missing information appears. or act if that information proves wrongdoing by the vessel master. For all of this, we need time. Yeah, it's 21 slides so far, and only now I will go on board with Steven there. Yeah. So this is the time where we go on board, because we have answers to everything we've done so far. How we regulate what we may not understand. This is, again, associated to this, we did that, and it's basically the inner understanding of long line, Poland liners, purseaners, generals about how information is managed and distributed inside commercial fishing boats, and the latest one, we take a lot of pride of this because we've done this with Mimra in the Marshall Islands, is the carrier vessels inside. So, yeah, small details, you know, it's like what happens, you know, how long it takes for two vessels to get aside. No, it's, no, it's a transshipment, they've been together for 1.5 hours. It's like, is that Purseaner carrier, 1.5 hours? It may take it 45 minutes to get aside, so how many tons is it worth, you know? So these little things, you know. Oh, sorry. Tracking, examples of the tracking that the different vessel does and the speeds at which they move. Anyway, details. So, what information we have on board? Well, of course, that's when you get on board. Certificate of registration, fishing license, good standing certificates, crew list, ship particulars, catch report, the MTU certificates, captain logbook. You know, it's amazing what you can find if you sit and look at the captain logbook. Fat logs, engine logs, freezer logs. It was a transshipment. Well, if it was a transshipment, they must have opened the hatches. They must have opened the hatches. There are temperature records because they need to temperature records for the insurance, because the insurance is based on how much money you actually have on board, and that depends on how much fish you have on board. So these things are important. So if they open the hatches, go and look at the temperature records. No, we should receive oil and nets. So why you open the hatches? Bunker receipts. We got together with the bunker receipt. Okay, we're the bunker receipts. You know, nice receipts, video footage, vessels. Who I was talking with? That every vessel today, being a long liner purseaner, they have cameras on board. It's not EM, it's their own cameras. Yeah, for safety or for whatever. So, but that is evidence that it's on board and we can use it. So, how we manage all this information, and I'm almost done. The next step of that is what we're trying now, and it's almost on the door. There's a couple of countries using it, and we're going to have the final evaluation of it in March. We developed, the FFA developed the Electronic Port State Measures Agreement Information Management System. Electronic Port State Measures, ePSM Information Management System. So all of these information sources that we talked get brought together, and we have a record that starts with the vessel announcing it comes into port and finish with the vessel clearance before departing. So all of that is in one set of information instead of being on 3 different sets of papers. This is another day of presentation, so I'm not going to go here, but I just show you, for example, it has, so you can be into this as an agent, or you can be into this as a fisheries officer, either as a contact point where you have access to everything, or as a operator, fisheries officer who's dealing with individual vessels. Unless you are unlucky like Johnny and I and a few other guys, where we are for everything. So anyone that is practicing practicing with the system, we get the emails. And it keeps a record of all of the vessels by date and by authorization number. So we can use that later on for issues like a catch documentation scheme, which will be the last thing I'm going to be talking about. So then we have a vessel representative. And again, this is also, we thought there will be a bit of resistance by the agents, but they actually love it because then they don't have to use their own systems. Yeah? So it's always important with fisheries is if you're gonna, when we design this, it's like, well, these guys are always with pieces of paper. So incentives, we come back to incentive for compliance. If you want to ask people for something, see what can you offer in return. So anyway, yeah, this is happening, and of course, if you have questions, as Oscar will say, I knew way more of my 20s than I know now.
Thanks, Francisco, and don't stress, we're right on time. Does anyone have any questions? Is that me? Does anyone have any questions for Francisco? No? Everybody just wants to go and have tea and cake?
Okay. This thing is that if Johnny and Nate talked about at the top level, this is at the bottom, but it's all part of the same system. Yeah? This is what happened in the countries, the other happens in between the countries. So it's all part of the same.
Good, okay, well, in that case, let's take our tea break.